Taliban doing? I mean, any child in Afghan would know that this wouldn't work. Pashtuns are very proud people. Nobody's going to tell them what to do, and certainly nobody's going to threaten or push them around. I've spent so much time with them in the field. I know what they think and how tough they are. And you just don't push a Pashtun. Tell them you've got to do this. You've got to be a Democrat, obey orders, or else. But that's exactly what they tried to do. And they brought in people who the Pashtun majority regard as traitors and quislings. And, of course, they got this response. And then they even had the foolishness to say, well, our troops will mix with the people in this sort of Maoist statement, and we'll teach them to trust us. But how is a Pashtun tribesman who lives in the Middle Ages going to learn anything from an 18-year-old from Alabama or Georgia? I cannot imagine.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that is part of the big strategy, isn't it, is trying to recruit militias, basically private death squads of Afghans to just turn against other Afghans.
Well, we've been doing that, and the American Special Forces, this will be a big scandal. One of these days, Scott, the story is going to come out of our death squads, what they've been doing. We learned this originally in Central America. I was covering the wars down there, and I saw this death squads, particularly in El Salvador, also Nicaragua. Very bloody, very deadly. You just go and kill all your enemies in the middle of the night. This is what we're doing. You commit all kinds of atrocities, kill the wrong people. It doesn't matter. Wipe them out. The old line from Vietnam, kill them all, let God sort them out. Well, this is what we're doing. And we're also following Israeli policy because the Israelis have been advising us in a very big way in Iraq and Afghanistan in counterinsurgency, as they call it. Or meaning beating down local uprisings.
Right, how to occupy someone in 6 easy steps, right?
That's right. You invade his country, he fights back, and you call him a terrorist or an insurgent. Well, it's butchering the English language, that's for sure. But anyway, we've taken this very violent policy, and I think it's generating us far more enemies than it's killing foes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, that's sort of the mystery here. I guess it's not too much of one, but General McChrystal, before he lost his job, told Michael Hastings at Rolling Stone magazine that, he figures the ratio is about 10-1. That is, every time that the Joint Special Operations Command sends the Delta Force out to kill somebody, they create 10 new enemies. And then so he says, we're just going to keep on like this, but we're going to target very specifically, which still sounds to me like digging a hole to get out of it.
Well, that's what the Israelis have been doing on the West Bank now for decades, and it hasn't worked for them. It's not working for us in Afghanistan or Iraq. We've killed a lot of people. We managed to suppress the resistance in certain areas, but it generally comes back. And when you hear these American generals talking about, we've driven the Taliban out of the area, it's hallucinogenic. Well, of course, they're guerrillas. Then what, are they going to sit still and wait to be hit by F-16s and tanks? Of course not. They're going to fade away and come back and fight another day. That's the essence of guerrilla warfare. But we're hearing again the echoes of the body counts in Vietnam and the search and destroy and clear and hold and strategic hamlets and all those other words that led us straight to defeat.
Mm-hmm. Well, to pick up on the Vietnam analogy, we have Pakistan next door, the safe haven. If only we extend the war into Cambodia, Mr. President, then we can get rid of the safe havens where the Viet Cong are hiding. And here we are, spreading the war across this Durand line, this old border that separates Afghanistan from Pakistan. It seems like the war party's intent on turning it into one big war, even as you wrote on your website, ericmargolis.com, this country is experiencing biblical-level floods. One of the worst natural disasters since ancient times is going on in Pakistan right now, and we're still bombing them.
We are. In fact, the level of attacks and killing by American Predators and Reaper drones is sharply escalated. And every time you hear one of these attacks, they're attacking compounds, big mud-walled houses that shelter women and children and entire extended families. And in an attempt to kill one or two so-called militants, they're killing generally 10 to 20 civilians, according to Pakistani press studies. So it's a very bloody and very counterproductive. But here we're generating 20 enemies rather than 10, as McChrystal said.
Well, and in this case, and I guess in both cases, right, these countries, supposedly their states are our friends, but we're still bombing the people inside the countries as though Kabul never fell, as though the war was never over.
got a lot of Pakistanis. There's a growing feeling in Pakistan that Pakistan has become an occupied country. They have a government that has been bought lock, stock, and barrel by the U.S. They've got a military which more or less is very responsive to Washington. They've got, and has to be, because the U.S. keeps threatening to unleash the Indians on the Pakistanis if they're not good. This is what happened in after 9/11. The Blackwater and all these other mercenary groups are running around in Pakistan. There are American ground troops there. There's a tremendous amount of American influence and control. So the Pakistanis, you're already hearing calls to liberate Pakistan from the Americans, never mind Afghanistan. This is a dangerous situation.
That's funny. There's an article in the New York Times a couple of months back, Eric, where they talked about how, Islamic extremism and anti-Americanism are on the rise really bad in Pakistan, and we're thinking that maybe they just have too much free speech there, and these radicals are able to get people's ears. But no mention of drones, no mention of a puppet dictatorship that lasted for 10 years with American help, et cetera, et cetera. Just, it's not in there. They're a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists and Muslims, those Pakistanis.
That's right. And it's the Saudis with their madrasas and the Wahhabis and everything but the real reason. And I can tell you, as having written for years for the Pakistani media, that some figures point up to 90% of Pakistanis really are hating the United States now and say that the United States is Pakistan's primary enemy. It's moved ahead of India on the enemies list. That's terrible. It is an extremely strategic, important country. We can't afford to turn Pakistan into an enemy, but the Pakistanis believe that the U.S. is determined to destroy Pakistan, relentlessly destroy Pakistan, in order to get its hold of its nuclear weapons and remove them.
Well, and that's really not that far-fetched, considering the very same publication, the New York Times, ran a piece back in November of 2007 by Michael O'Hanlon from the left, well, pseudo-left, the Democratic side of the war party, and Robert Kagan from the Republican side, saying, well, maybe that's what we need to do, is go ahead and invade Pakistan and take their nuclear weapons. Eric?
Yeah, well, God save us from people like that. These were also the two great military brains, the darling of the media, who were urging that we had to rush in and invade Iraq, lest Saddam Hussein unleash his fiendish weapons of mass destruction and destroy the world. They turned out to be fools, and they remain fools at this point. They're dead wrong. And Pakistan's nuclear weapons do not threaten anybody. They're very well guarded, and they're designed to prevent India from overrunning Pakistan. And the American neocons are worried because they have this nightmare without substance that these nuclear weapons might get to other Arab countries facing Israel.
Mm-hmm. Well, and is that likely?
No, it's not. I've been very close for a long time with some of the senior Pakistani generals and intelligence people, and there's no way, in my experience of views, that officially that the nuclear technology or nuclear weapons would leak out. In fact, the head of Pakistani intelligence told me years ago that Iran had offered to pay Pakistan's entire defense budget for 10 years in order to get some nuclear weapons. Pakistan had refused. It'll continue to refuse, though you can't discount totally that the technology may leak out as it did under Abdul Qadir Khan, the scientist. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, Pakistan has no interest right now in giving or selling nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm. Now, you have a great article on your website today, Eric. It's ericmargolis.com. Everyone spelled it like Margolis, about the Kashmir conflict. And I'm afraid we're not going to have time to review too much of it. But at the very end of the article, you talked about America's insistence that Pakistan get out of Kashmir and stop trying to protect their interests in Kashmir because we want them to use their military against, I don't know, chasing Ayman al-Zawahiri all over the Northwest Territories or something like that. But at the same time, we're putting them in a real bad position by making, as George Bush did, this nuclear deal with India, empowering India in Afghanistan, etc. And the way you kind of end your article just really revealed the stupidity of the situation where we're really backing all sides against each other and boxing ourselves into a terrible corner, it seems like there.
We are. We're playing at counter purposes to our own interests, supporting Pakistan, supporting India, supporting them against each other. contradictory policies because our basic policy is flawed. There's no coherent policy for the whole region. And instead of talking AFPAC, we're going to have to start talking about AFPAC-Ka, meaning Kashmir, as well, because we are slowly being drawn into this Kashmir crisis, where the 100 people have been shot down in the streets there by Indian forces in the last month. And this is the world's oldest dispute. It predates the Arabs and the Israelis. So 1947, it's still going on, and it's so dangerous, and I wrote about it again, Scott, because it pits India and Pakistan, both nuclear-armed, in a eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation with their nuclear arsenals on 3-minute hair alerts. So we should be very conscious of it. It could blow up one day.
Agreed. I highly urge everyone to go read the article. It's right now on the front page at ericmargolis.com, spelled like Margolis. And you can also find his archive at lewrockwell.com. The books are War at the Top of the World and American Raj, Liberation or Domination. Thank you very much for your time, Eric. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure as always, Scott. Thank you.
I'm Scott Horton. I'm helping Alan Minsky fill in for Ian Masters today. Alan?